Let me ask you something, what's the first thing you think about when you picture a game? I feel like most people will share the same answer when it comes to this. It's right there in front of you, that being its graphics and art style. You simply can't picture a game without them. Throughout the years, we've seen many titles evolve and change with how they look due to advancements in hardware. Games look more unique and different now than ever before because of this. When it comes to JRPGs, they've always had these captivating worlds and vistas that have truly intrigued me. It's one of the many reasons this genre is so amazing to begin with. When it comes to how they look visually, you really started to see developers experiment more with their art styles, starting off with the 5th generation of consoles, in particular with the PlayStation 1. There's also more mainstream examples like with the jaw-dropping at the time and still excellent looking Persona 5, which really shaped things up both inside and outside of its genre, with a bunch of games being heavily inspired by its art style and user interface. What I personally enjoy a lot about JRPGs is that unlike a lot of other games out there which rely on realistic visuals, for the most part JRPGs are heavily stylized, which has always been the case. And even when they do rarely go for realistic visuals, the atmosphere and world itself can still be designed in a bizarre and beautiful way. Such was the case with the critically acclaimed Expedition 33 Clair Obscura. Which is why today we'll be taking a look at a bunch of incredible art styles found in some of my all-time favourite JRPGs. We'll be mixing things up by looking at both old and new titles from this genre, and with all that out of the way, let's jump right into things. Starting off this list is an obscure title that really captivated me with its world and presentation when I finally got around to playing it, that being Resonance of Fate. It's unique in how it incorporates a more western look with its character designs and slow motion gunplay mechanic, with it being inspired by the Matrix movies. You really get a feel for this during its gun focused combat system, which I've gone over in a previous video of mine, but it's very satisfying to both watch and play. This all culminates into something very unique, but on top of that you also have other blends of art direction such as the steampunk inspired city of Basel, which, similar to Final Fantasy VII's Midgar, is designed to have the rich on the top floors and the poor common folk on the bottom floors. With the fact that towns are explored on a 2D plane, it really makes this world feel like a pop-up book at times. And also allows for an almost cinematic style to exploring, since the camera is always focusing on one position. It's a bit similar to fixed cameras seen in old horror titles, and how it feels like a director makes sure every angle the player is looking at is full of life and depth. Seeing the lighting also go through the exposed machinery that makes up Basel, such as its cogs, is something I'm a big fan of. It's a nice juxtaposition between nature and science. The combat system also pops with its use of bullet time, and when accompanied by the characters' flowing outfits, it just looks cool, like any angle would make for a great screenshot opportunity. Resonance of Fate's presentation is a huge highlight of the game for me and still looks amazing over 10 years later. Up next we have a more controversial choice with this one. I get that to some people the Megaman Legend games aren't JRPGs, but they take a lot of gameplay mechanics and designs that the genre is known for. To say that they weren't at least inspired by earlier JRPG titles will be kinda missing the point. Anyway, the anime art style that they somehow managed to pull off with these games is still impressive looking over 25 years later since the original title came out. It's genuine witchcraft how good these games look on the PlayStation 1, its vibrant and anime-esque world is immediately striking, and these visuals have always felt at home with JRPGs. Whereas many titles during the 5th generation of consoles were pushing for more bold and realistic visuals, Legends kept things stylized with its low polished shell shaded aesthetic. And similar to the Wind Waker, it was met with a lot of backlash from fans back in the day, but it seems like most people like that title appreciate the game more nowadays, and its art style has become a big reason because of this. There are even some indie games coming out that clearly take inspiration from this game's art style. It's just that nice to look at. Here's hoping that we'll see it return someday, though I'm incredibly doubtful Capcom will ever give us Legends 3. Alright, so moving away from the sad reality that we'll never get Mega Man Legends 3, let's take a look at the Atelier series. So there are quite a lot of games from this franchise, and I've always appreciated how for each arc they go for a different tone or art direction with the way the games look. But by far, if you had to ask me which one I thought had my favourite visuals, I would have to go with the Dusk trilogy. The shell shaded, bold look to everything really brings the Dusk games to life. What can I say, this kind of art style really draws me in every time. But what really sets these titles apart visually from the rest is how it's led by lead artist Hidari. You might be familiar with their style if you've ever played the Fire Emblem series, as they've done some of the art in Heroes and was the lead artist with Shadows of Valencia, the remake to Gaiden on the 3DS. Anyway, what I'm a big fan of in particular when it comes to Hidari is how they go about their character designs. The hues and soft look to everything makes it really distinct and memorable, and is an aesthetic I wish the series will return to one day. The Atelier games have always been my go-to JRPG series for escapism when you need something to unwind to and get lost in, and I've always felt like the Dust trilogy really nails that vibe that I'm personally looking for from a slice of life alchemy simulator. One of my favourite JRPGs to come out of 2024 was Metaphor Refantazio. From its amazing gameplay, music and story to its standout art direction, Atlus really knocked it out of the park with this game. In particular, I really appreciated the amount of visual diversity when it comes to the fantasy races in Refantazio. It's a little anime, but also has its own flair of medieval fantasy that stands out when put next to Atlus's other games. There's also its in-game named human bosses, which look really funky and abstract. They're a good example of showcasing just how far this art style can go. When researching for this video, I actually discovered a lot of these bosses were inspired by Renaissance Dutch artist Hieronymus Bosch. Apologies for the poor pronunciation, by the way. Anyway, when looking at his art from the 16th century when compared to the games, the resemblance is clearly there. Atlus has always had great art direction in their games, be it the more dark and striking Megaman releases or the bright and vibrant Persona titles. But there's a really nice culture blend of Japan meets medieval Europe in this one that sets it above their previous titles for me personally. Add on the fact there's magic, steampunk and fictional fantasy races, and you have a striking game visually that I couldn't recommend more to fans of JRPGs. Let's shake things up once again and move back to one of the best systems for the genre, that being the PlayStation 1. Squaresoft was known for their incredible lineup of games on this system. You had the low poly dark ambience of New York in the late 90s with Parasite Eve. There's also the retro looking 2D sprites on a 3D plane of Xenogears, which is aged incredibly well. Or the more well known pre-rendered and charming look of the Final Fantasy games that were on this system. But in this video I wanted to mention a more forgotten game that released towards the end of the system's lifespan, that being Threads of Fate. I love this game. It feels like a storybook with an art style that I haven't seen replicated since it's come out. It's all modelled in full 3D, but whereas other Squaresoft titles like Parasite Eve or Final Fantasy 7 and 8 went for realism at the time, Threads of Fate plays to the system's strengths by going for this pseudo-chibi anime look that I'm a big fan of. I mentioned in a previous video I made going in depth into this game, but there's actual hair and cloth physics in Threads of Fate. Everything animates so smoothly outside of the character's static facial expressions, which is something the system struggled to animate outside of FMVs. It's just a pure and simple, light-hearted experience, but every now and then the NPCs of this game's world will drop a line that gets you thinking. I really wish this game made more of a splash back in the day, since there's definitely a place for these more simplistic JRPGs, and they tend to stand out more during the era since a lot of games were going for more serious and ambitious narratives. Threads of Fate stands out on the PlayStation 1 as a more light-hearted JRPG among a sea of serious titles, and its art style is one of its strongest appeals when looking at the game today. For this next entry, we're going all out into the anime aesthetic with a series that feels like you're literally playing an anime, that being the Sakura Wars games. Now, their offerings in the West are a bit scarce due to its lack of localization. On the official side of things, we have Sakura Wars 5 and the reboot, but fans have been pushing to localize the previous games to amazing efforts for a passion project. Anyway, if you've ever been a fan of that vintage shoujo style look of anime from the 90s, then this is definitely worth taking a look at. The older titles had this more visual novel look to them, but were also somewhat animated to avoid things looking too static. For the 5th game in particular, you got to see Japan's take on New York, which gave the location a certain charm to it. There's also the most modern entry from this series with the 2019 installment of Sakura Wars, which acted as a soft reboot for this game, and that was also the case for its visuals. Once again, we're rocking that steampunk aesthetic with a Taisho inspired Japan, and everything's animated in 3D, which makes interactions look more expressive between the characters. Also, on the topic of presentation, I have to mention just how smooth the game transitions from its load screen back to its gameplay. This looks stellar. I feel like the Sakura Wars reboot has gone kind of underrated by today's standards, and it's a shame since its solid presentation still looks great over 6 years later after the game released on a previous generation console. From one neglected Sega-owned JRPG to another, Valkyria Chronicles really needs to make a comeback, but this isn't the video for that, we're talking about art styles, damn it. Anyway, Valkyria Chronicles has this gorgeous storybook art to everything with the way it's presented. I like how it clearly uses watercolours and sketches to present its world with these outlines and intentional imperfections. This game is for strategy RPG fans, and it's up there with the best of them. I particularly appreciate how there's also onomatopoeias similar to a comic book whenever there's noises being made by the heavy machinery. It also takes place in Europe during World War II, which isn't exactly something I'd expect to say about a game that looks like this, but it's certainly out there for a setting. Hopefully I will see this one return someday, but it has been a while. At the very least, this timeless art style will keep it from aging. If you was to ask me what JRPG was my all-time favourite, I would tell you without a single pause for hesitation that it would be Valkyrie Profile 2 Silmeria. Its writing, combat, characters and world is something that immediately gripped me when playing. The Valkyrie Profile games in general, well not this one, are all masterpieces. The original was one of the few games on the PlayStation 1 that went with sprites over 3D models, and it looks incredible even today because of it. But its sequel on the PS2 with its 2D world that's so incredibly animated, similar to Resonance of Fate, it feels like someone is holding a camera and perfectly directing everywhere you look. In all honesty, it looks like an early PlayStation 3 game. It's also made by the same developers as Resonance of Fate, that being Tri-Ace, the GOATs. Any excuse I can think of to talk about Valkyrie Profile 2 more is a good one. It's such an amazing experience, and its art direction is a strong reason behind it. When it comes to renowned JRPG series, you really can't not mention the Xeno games. They've come a long way since Gears, and are finally starting to get the appreciation they deserve with the Blade titles. But that begs the question, which one had the best art style? For me, there are two clear winners, but one just barely inches above the other. The runner-up would be Xenosaga Episode 3. There's just something about the later released PlayStation 2 games when being played at a higher resolution that just looks jaw-dropping. It's gotta be the art style that they went with. Anyway, Episode 3 has a lot of really nice looking cutscenes, and even though I did like the more anime look of Episode 1, the final installment just nails the way these characters are supposed to look. But the real winner of great art direction is of course with Xenoblade Chronicles X. It's tied with Elden Ring for me when it comes to having the best open world of any game out there. The alien planet setting really allowed Monolith Soft to do whatever they want with the biome designs and look of all the enemies and different races. The recently released Definitive Edition is the best way to play this game now that it's been given an even greater graphical overhaul to a game that was already looking like it was made using magic back on the Wii U. Listen, just get a skill, turn off the UI and fly around and you'll get exactly what I mean with this one. I can easily get lost just cruising around and admiring the vast vistas and faunas that make up Planet Mirror. So before ending things off, I'd also like to give some honourable mentions. First off will be the Dragon Quest series, in particular with my personal favourite, that being the 8th game. I didn't have my own footage, which is why I didn't include it in a more fleshed out segment, but what more is there to say that hasn't been? Dragon Quest VIII is by far the best the series has ever transitioned into 3D. Akira Toriyama's incredible character designs really come to life with the cel shaded art direction, which is similar to games like Okame and The Wind Waker. The music in particular with its overworld theme also deserves some praise since it really brings this game's world to life when accompanied by its incredible art style. Another honourable mention would have to go to Visions of Mana. There's a reason this game has Vision in the title, and that's because it looks incredible. In particular, its ambience and environments really pop out, especially when playing the game at 4K. Vanillaware also deserves a shout out for going that extra mile and using hand-drawn sprites and environments to really make their game stand high above the rest of them. Any game they make is a guaranteed masterpiece, but my particular favourite is Odin Sphere with how it looks like a storybook and has multiple protagonists. Also, I know it's not out as of the making of this video, but an honourable mention just has to go to the upcoming Trolls in the Sky First Chapter remake. I absolutely love the original like many others, and this remake is rolling out the red carpet treatment and giving it such a facelift from how it used to look. I really can't wait to play it when it comes out. The way they brought it into the modern day is genuinely mind-blowing. This is the best looking anime JRPG. I know it's not out yet, but every time I see it, it activates a neuron in my brain that I haven't felt before. But yeah, that's going to be all from me in this more light-hearted and positive upload, taking a look at a more underappreciated aspect of game design. But now, I'm curious, do you have any JRPGs that you think look incredible and don't get enough recognition? Feel free to let me know in the comment section. Also, any feedback on this video will be appreciated. Thank you so much for watching and I hope you have a nice rest of your day.